back to order. We'll move on to agenda item number 20, Black Bear Committee report. I'll give this one over to Commissioner Drew for a minute since Mitch isn't here.
All right, I'll just step through our agenda from the February 21st meeting. In short, we do not have any actions from a committee standpoint to recommend to the commission today, but I will just step through the agenda. We did meet in Reno on Friday, February 21st. We started at 8:30, and I think we got over about 6:30, so it was a long meeting. We covered a lot of ground. We had agenda items on cost revenue associated with the bear hunt. I don't believe there was any action taken. We discussed the premise for establishing the bear hunt. We discussed the effect of the bear hunt on management and urban interface populations. We talked about the aspects of the black bear hunt and the possible use of human dimensions studies. And the outcome of that is we are going to have a group from UNLV come in and give a presentation to the committee in regards to that, the human dimensions part. We reviewed a series of NACs. The first was NAC 502373, which is basically kind of the core of the black bear hunt regulations. There was one motion on that to disallow the harvest of sows. That motion did not pass on a 2-2 vote. We had discussion on NAC 503.0047, which is the edible portions NAC. Essentially, in a nutshell, the issue there is we could change the NAC, but it would be out of line with the NRS. Essentially, there's an NRS that defines edible portions, and so we took no action on that. We discussed the NAC in regards to hunting with a dog. That's 503.147. There was a motion to disallow hunting with a dog for the bear hunt. That did not pass on a 2-2 vote. There was a second motion to have staff draft a regulation that would allow the commission flexibility to look at changes within the CR. For instance, if we wanted to have a spot and stock season or other regulations regarding hunting with a dog in regards to the bear hunt, that will come back to the committee for further review. We reviewed NAC 502.400, which talks about the attachment of a tag or permit to the animal. I believe that was an oversight originally, that there was some things that weren't clear there. So we made one small addition of black bear to that NAC. Again, that will come back to the committee for review. We reviewed NAC 503.142, hunting big game mammals with a firearm. The committee's recommendation was to add shotgun as a legal weapon for use with bears. Again, that will come back, draft regulation will come back to the committee for further review. We discussed a little bit the development of a commission policy pertinent to the Nevada black bear hunt. By this point in the agenda, we were pretty wore out, and we're going to keep it on the agenda just in case there's some catch-all items that we want to incorporate that aren't incorporated in some of the other change and review that we're looking at. So that's going to remain on the committee's agenda at this point. And then we talked briefly about the report of the 3-year comprehensive review and how that will need to be put together and reported out. The committee's general feeling is that that report would need to be developed and then approved by the commission. But at this point, we're still kind of in the middle of the review, and I don't think we're ready to I don't believe we had any discussions in terms of how that will take shape for the format or anything else. So at this point, we do have another meeting set for April 11th, Friday, April 11th in Reno. And we'll bring back the NACs that we recommended some reviews to, and there were a couple other agenda items that I can't think off the top of my head. But for as long as a meeting as it was, those are the high points and the actions that were taken. Again, there was nothing that came from the committee that would warrant action today.
And as Commissioner Drew stated, we did have multiple 2-2 votes during that day. Our committee's been running on a 4-person committee, which lends itself to 2-2 votes. At one point, I had appointed Bob Cook from the Lake Tahoe area, sits on the Douglas County CAB, to that committee. He has other obligations. He sits on like 14 other boards, and he has not been able to attend our meeting. So we end up with 2-2 votes. I've been asked if I'm going to replace Mr. Cook on that committee, and at the current time, the answer is no. The committee, we've spent so much time going down so many roads that I would not feel comfortable bringing somebody else into the fold as a committee member this late in the game. So we're going to bring back some topics that are 2-2 votes to the commission, but I think that the 2-2 vote accurately portrays the discussion going on in the committee more than a winning vote. Sometimes maybe we need to bring some stuff back as a tie vote to the commission, so there's some decisions made here. I don't see it being all bad having 2-2 votes coming out of the committee when there's no, and the formal action is going to be taken with this body, so I'm not having much heartburn with the 2-2 tie vote. And the record will reflect that. So, do you have anything else to add, Commissioner? Any commission members have any questions or comments about agenda item number 20, Fair Committee report? This is an action item, and we put it on here just in case a commissioner had something we need to bring up. Plus, it also affords time for public comment. So let's start. Since Elko's on the screen, is there any public comment on agenda item number 20, Black Bear Committee report? Okay, seeing none, I will take it. Does anybody in Las Vegas have any comment on the Black Bear Committee report, agenda item number 20?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Anybody in Reno have public comment on the Black Bear Committee report? Okay. Back.
Elko has comments.
Okay. Go ahead, Elko.
Randall Stobroom for the record. Most people grow up to love bears. There are teddy bears, Yogi bears, Boo Boo bears, and hundreds of others. Real live wild bears are a different story, and people must not perceive wild bears as cartoon figures. With so many black bears roaming Nevada, it is inevitable that a few will behave badly and if they don't fear people. Learning to mortally fear people just might be the best lesson we can teach bears by controlling their numbers through scientifically managed hunting seasons. The alternative is letting them become dangerous nuisance by intentionally inviting them into our lives. The following information is critical on making your decision, and it comes from an article in the magazine Predator Extreme written by Patrick Durkin, April issue of 2014. As black bears increase their numbers and expand their range in North America, more than a few bear experts suggest our bear/people problems will only worsen in areas that forbid bear hunting. In 2006, Professor Valerius Geest, now retired from the University of Calgary, wrote that large predators are better off under hunting regulations for many reasons. Geest notes, bears in Canada's national parks have very high percentage of dying due to concerns for public safety. That's because once bears become used to people and lose their fear of us, they're more likely to get into situations that threaten human life and property. In turn, that brings police, conservation officers, or simple frontier justice. In fact, where wildlife agencies offer bear hunting seasons, the public enjoys more outdoor opportunities than in places that become bear sanctuaries. Geist wrote, a distribution of hunting opportunities generates indirect public benefits. One of these is the freedom of the woods. In this case, the harassment of bears through hunting conditions. Bears avoid humans and allow safe camping and hiking. Clearly, this depends on a reasonably large number of hunters going into bear habitat, quote unquote. Maybe that's why Wisconsin, which nurtures a large active hunting culture, hasn't reported one fatal attack by black bears in the past 110 years, even though it supports one of North America's healthiest black bear populations. But with hundreds of thousands of black bears roaming the continent, it's inevitable that a few will behave badly if they don't fear people. In fact, research reported in 2011 by Professor Stephen Herrero at the University of Calgary documented 59 black bear attacks that killed 63 people in Canada and the United States. One of those 54, 86% attacks occurred between 1960 and 2009. Bears endure periodic food stress more often, which might push some bears to view people as prey. Herrero concluded 49 of the 54 fatal attacks, 91% since 1960, bears had acted as predators. That is, they weren't surprised by accident. They weren't sows protecting cubs. They weren't protecting kills to try to. Yes.
We're at 3 minutes. We're beyond 3 minutes.
Okay, please let me finish. Please let me finish here. In studying killings. Hey, listen. If I have to abide by your laws and get, or your rules here on getting this stuff done in 3 minutes, you should abide by your own laws by saying, hey, look, if we got to meet back here in a half an hour, don't make it an hour and 45 minutes. If you did that again this morning, and we patiently wait for you guys all the time. 10 minutes should be 10 minutes, not 20 minutes. Half an hour should be half an hour, not an hour and 45 minutes. And I'm sitting here patiently waiting for you guys, but I tell you what, for the record, I will turn in this report, but just take that into consideration, because, it's mutual respect. Ours for yours, and you should respect us sitting up here in Elko waiting for you guys to get back from lunch. I'll turn this report in for the record, and I urge all of you to please read it. Very important information. Thank you.
Yes. For the record, Dave Gowan, representing the Nevada Houndsman Association. I just wanted to ask you a question. You said there would be another committee meeting on the 11th of April. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I'd like to thank you for the live conference here in Elko, by the way. It's very helpful. But I also would like to make a complaint. On the trapping committee, we had meetings throughout the state plan. And not sure why the rest of the state hasn't been included in these meetings with the black bear. We're all residents of this state, and we all have a vested interest in wildlife across this state. To hold them exclusively in Reno or Vegas, I think, is inappropriate. And I just think that we are people in Elko and the rural areas should have the same opportunities that everyone else has. And then. I just wanted to comment on the removal of the dogs in your boat and that. Just want to pose a question. What is the significant difference between educating bears with Karelian bear dogs by the department versus the public using a hound to do the same thing? And why doesn't the public get the same opportunity to educate those bears? There's a possibility that there could be a list of houndsmen that could be called to do the educating of those bears for free in these problem areas. It's just a point. Washington State has a Karelian bear dog program that the state pays for, the taxpayer pays for. We have a full assortment of hunters in this state that would be perfectly willing to educate those bears voluntarily. And I'll save most of my comments for the April 11th meeting, but I just would really like to see meetings fairly presented across the state of Nevada. Thank you.
No more public comment in Elko? Okay, I'll bring it back to Reno. Ms. Smith?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, hold on. Well, let's go to Mrs. Smith. I called her up, and then we'll go back to Elko.
Okay.
Come on up.
Kathy Smith, Reno, Nevada, for the record. I just wanted to point out some inaccuracies in one of the prior statements that hunting has not been shown to have any effect on wildlife conflict. According to the 4th Annual International Bear Conference, the data has not shown that to be the case. And there have been several studies done on this. I don't have my studies with me. Some have, I think one was done in Wisconsin, and actually Mark Turnett from the Department of Pennsylvania Fish and Game actually did a study where they took out about 50% of their bear population, and it did not affect their human-bear conflict. It is, unfortunately, it's more to do with the people and the trash. It's not much to do with the bear densities, unless you start significantly decreasing those bear numbers to apparently less than even 50% of your population. It really just depends on if you want to do that. If you want to take bears out of Nevada, that would be the only way to affect your human bear conflict. And I just don't know if that's where you're going. The other thing that's kind of interesting is there are several locations where bears and humans do coexist. You can look at Brooks Falls in Alaska, McNeil River, those areas where grizzly bears actually coexist in close proximity to humans without any history of injury or mortalities. And it's interesting, and I don't know how it'll pan out, but that we tend to kill bears that are used to humans or that aren't disturbed by humans. And if you look at the history of domestication of animals, what we did is we actually took out and either did not reproduce the animals that tended to be more aggressive. And what we do here with our wild animals is we tend to kill the animals that are more docile. And it makes you wonder if when we take out these docile animals, if eventually you're going to get an animal that is much more aggressive in the wildlands to come in and actually injure a person that would not have been injured if that more docile bear had been left in place. So it's just something to think about when we continue with the urban bear management.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go back to Elko. Is there public comment in Elko?
My name is Rich Sandoz. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would like to support the committee action so far. And on those 2-2 votes that you were referring to, I think that basically should just stay as a no action. But if you guys did decide you wanted to hear it on a 2-2 vote, those items, I think there should be notice for where we can give input on those specific items as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else in Elko?
No more comment.
Okay, thank you. We'll bring it back to Reno. Dr. Mullen.
Mr. Chairman, Don Mulder, as far as I know, there's never been a human black bear incident in California or Nevada in the history of the universe. A previous speaker mentioned Stephen Herrero, and in one of his comments, Herrero was, I think, generally regarded as one of the experts on human-bear interactions and conflicts and bear attacks and so on. If memory serves, Herrero's PhD thesis took place in Jasper National Park back in the early 70s. And if I recall correctly, he studied black bear human interactions at a dump, at the Jasper National Park dump. And I believe that he looked at something like 762, if the number sticks with me, human bear interactions over a period of time where it was everything from humans observing bears from a distance to close up, to throwing things at bears, to threatening bears and whatnot. And Herrero didn't see one single adverse human bear event in 762 encounters at the Jasper dump. I think that says more than what previous speakers said about risks of humans from black bears.
Okay, is there any other? Dr. Dixon.
For the record, Paul Dixon, Clark County CAB. We actually had this on our agenda, but ended up tabling it because all we had were your motions that were available for backup material. And got several comments from the public at Los Alamos, that said that we couldn't have a meaningful discussion without understanding the background to that, which would have been the minutes to your meeting. I would ask in the future if possible, and I know the Department of Wildlife is booked, they have overworked staff, but if we're gonna have an action item, it's nice to have background for that if people haven't attended meetings that can represent that. And so it's something that put on my agenda where I thought there was a chance we could have stuff, but it didn't come. So I'm not sure how we deal with that and these things and be timely. So I'm just putting it out there because you guys have 30 days by law to get stuff out, but we also have, even if it isn't by law, you need 30 days just because the amount of volumetrically it was 9 hours of meetings, wasn't it? My understanding. So I don't know how to deal with it.
Until 7, so.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is I don't know how to deal with when you have an action item that I don't have enough material to discuss in cabinet this night, and especially something like Black Bear. So I just take it rather than to have a discussion based on supposition. Thank you.
And the issue with the minutes is we're relying on staff that is not employed to do minutes. They are employed to complete a task out of the minutes, and these committees have put an additional burden on staff to get that done. And if you have read the minutes from any trapping or black bear committee, they're pretty much verbatim. And so if you've got to type in 9 hours of meeting, it takes a considerable amount of time to ensure the accuracy and everything. It's a long process. The good thing about it is a committee meeting, and a lot of those discussions will be coming forward to the commission, and we will have ample public comment time and more discussion on every topic that comes out of the committee. We'll be on a commission agenda with full backup material supporting it. So just because we missed it once doesn't mean that there's going to be a decision made, not everything coming forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other public comment? Okay, Park, Elk Cove, no more public comment? All right, we're gonna move on, unless there's any further commission comment. Okay, we'll move on. Agenda item number 21, commission regulation. Commission general regulation 416 shed antlers, LCB file number R155-12. Rob Bonamici.
For the record, Rob Bonamici, Chief Game Warden. LCD file number R155-12 regarding shed antler collection. As I stated yesterday, it sets a season taking sheds from the field, and the suggestion is to take sheds from the field to collect shed antlers, and the season, postseason of April 15th through December 31st as closed to, or open to shed hunting, and so it'll be closed January 1st to April 14th. We received some public comment yesterday during the workshop, and I expect a little more public comment today as well.
Okay, any questions of Rob and before we, Commissioner Drew?
I have one, Rob, and I'm sorry I was out of the room when I think we discussed this yesterday, but on provision 2, a person who holds a hunting license issued by the department, how does that play out for, let's, for example, say youth, 12 and under?
It would be the same criteria because NRS establishes the age requirements for a hunting license. So we'd have to stay within those parameters.
Okay, so even though this is written as a person who holds that exemption for 12 and under would be maintained?
Correct.
Because I know that was a question I'd seen from several of the cabinet folks.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll take it out to public comment. Let's start with Clark County first.
Yes, we have comment, Chairman.
Chairman Rob, Jana Wright for the record. I want to thank the department for putting the well-being of wildlife front and center in proposing this ordinance, or regulation, I should say. I hope this mindset continues when we talk of the 96-hour trap visitation and chasing bears with hounds as they prepare for their dormant season. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other public comment from Clark County?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Elko next. Any public comment on the shed regulation proposal?
No comment.
No comment? Okay, we'll come back to you guys one more time after we take other comments, just in case. Sean, you want to come up? Oh, Mr. Reed.
John Reed, I'm the chairman of the Washoe Cab, and we oppose this unanimously. There were some things I wanted to impart last night, and I acquiesced to your request that we not, so please humor me if I run over, it'll be brief. This subtle, harmless-looking proposed regulation is the worst of its type since SB 221 attacked our gun rights in an effort that was thankfully vetoed by the governor. I submit this proposal is intellectually bankrupt and should be dismissed outright by this commission. The government has absolutely no business telling me on public lands that I can't do a harmless, simple, natural act like picking up a shed antler. This is a solution in search of a problem. Let's look at the purported problem. White Pine and Lincoln County say there are people spotting and chasing elk for the purposes of getting them to prematurely shed their antlers. Further, this is causing undue stress on the animals at a time when they are most vulnerable. This is, incidentally, the exact same language that the anti-bear hunt people use when we're discussing that issue, and it has exactly the same amount of science involved, which is zero. I want to hear this complaint really from a Lincoln County cab rep, and I've been to most of these meetings. I've hunted elk in Nevada for each of the last several years, mostly in Elko County, and I haven't heard any complaints from there. Poaching, misuse of ATVs, and bad hunter ethics, but nothing about chasing elk for their sheds. What we have mostly to go on is anecdotal information. So where's the evidence? More importantly, where's the science? The last I heard, 3 meetings ago, I think it was 3 meetings ago, the science was that the elk herds are so big we're evaluating new ways to reduce their numbers. You were congratulated for those very efforts by Mr. Spradlin yesterday. So where's the science that says that we need to have such an injection of government supervision over the simplest and most personal act of walking and picking up shed antlers? The department already has laws in place to protect big game animals from harassment. All you have to do to make this more specific is insert shed antlers in the introduction of NRS 503.010. Have you tried to get access to elk country in the winter? As Mr. Spradling said yesterday, Elko County is a very harsh place in the winter. I'll assume White Pine and Lincoln counties are equally as harsh and have access problems. If one is flying around an ultralight, it needs a takeoff runway of some sort. They're low powered and Nevada's high altitude. They ought to be easy to find. Additionally, how hard is it to track vehicles through the snow and brush? If this is where the problem is, then take the effort to catch those guys. By the way, there can't be many people with the motivation and equipment to be out there in the winter. Enforce the laws that already exist. Or, instead, every resident of Nevada gets punished for the bad actions of a few. This does sound like SB 221, doesn't it? Did you notice this discussion was only about elk at its inception? Somebody decided to sneak mule deer into the equation. Most mule deer I see pictures of in the winter are out in the sagebrush. Chasing, starting mule deer through the sagebrush would be a colossal effort for nothing, so I doubt it happens. Why was it inserted? This gives the department a statewide regulation instead of simply focusing on the problem around Ely. This is one reason I consider this bureaucratic overreach. Due to my position on the cab, I query outdoors persons about their observations and experiences with regularity. I've heard complaints about poaching, access, etc., but never about people chasing deer through the woods in search of shed antlers in Washoe County or anywhere else. Again, this is a solution looking for a problem. Possibly the worst part of this proposal, needing a hunting license to pick up a shed antler, is a bald-faced attempt to tax people for doing a harmless act. picking up shed antlers. The sportsmen in this room probably haven't thought about what this means to the unsuspecting general public, which I happen to represent. Let's look at this another way. The act of picking up an inanimate object from the ground is probably more in line with mining practices than hunting practices. So if the Nevada Mining Commission elects to force you to buy a mining permit for, say, $40, do you think this would be such a complacent group? And oh, by the way, the act of picking up a shed antler is completely harmless to the environment, to the animals, and to people. Envision a member of Friends of the Black Rock Desert out around the High Rock Canyon picking up a shed antler to be confronted by a game warden. It would go something like this. Freeze. Put that antler down. Do you have a hunting license for that thing? There's only going to be one response. Say what? Unbelievable. I suspect this will be a loser the first time that the department is sued trying to enforce this regulation. What is the science that connects a shed deer antler in Washoe County with chasing elk in White Pine or Lincoln counties? The last point I'll hit on, and I could go on, is that if you pass this, you will have just fundamentally changed the definition of hunting. There's not any possible way one confuses a shed antler with a live animal. In fact, the Chief Game Warden said as much yesterday when he said that shed antlers aren't currently considered wildlife. So under this proposal, we're to consider picking up shed antlers as hunting. In that event, we need to have hunt units and quotas, define what a trophy shed is, have shed hunting classes. And you just mentioned about the 12-year-olds and under not being able to do that. I think you see what I mean. I'll stop here. This is a bad proposal. It will have a lot of negative and far-reaching unintended consequences. I urge you to oppose this proposed regulation.
Okay, before we go any further, I want to make something clear for everybody. I offered Mr. Reed extra time. He did not come up here as general public comment. He came up here as a member of the CAB and representing that CAB. So I want it to be known that if you represent a CAB, you're representing a CAB and you get as much time as you need to represent your CAB properly. That's the process we're in. So I don't want to be questioned why I let Mr. Reed go on longer than 3 minutes. If you're representing a CAB, I want to hear what the CAB has to say. So, okay, who's next? Sean.
Sean Shea, Washoe County, I'm representing myself here. Yeah, I don't find this very, I think you guys should shoot this down. I mean, if it's all about the harassment, obviously law enforcement's not doing their job right off the bat. If this is happening, they need to jump on this right off the bat of the guys that are harassing. I mean, what's the difference of these guys just going out for a walk, still doing this, dropping antlers, GPS and where those antlers are, and keep going? I mean, you're hurting people in Washoe County that want to go out. Say I want to take some friends from Oregon that just want to come out. They're just, you know, in their mid-20s. They don't hunt or anything, but they want to go out around. They find their first shed. Yeah, they're jacked up. But I have to go, well, you guys gotta leave that because this commission said it's against the law for you guys to pick it up unless you have a hunting license. And I just think this is and where are you gonna stop with the biologists when the state biologists are doing field surveys, fish surveys? They're right in the middle of all this stuff. I doubt they're just gonna leave that shed right there. And so I'm totally against this, and hopefully you guys don't pass this.
Mr. Rosie.
Kevin Strozzi, Chairman of Nye County Advisory Board. Just want to let you guys know Nye County voted unanimously to support this. We have a problem in Central Nevada with those guys that come in, start chasing these bulls around, especially the bulls. Early, blowing them off their winter range. So we voted unanimously to support this. We thought having a season on the collection of shed antlers was a good idea.
Walt?
Walt Gardner for the record. I've got several problems with this. If somebody comes out of Idaho or Utah or any place like that, not horn hunting, just came out to see the area in Nevada, and they find a horn. If they pick that horn up, they're breaking your law. Not intentionally. They didn't come here to do that. It's just an incidental deal. You're denying them the ability to pick that up. It's just like Mr. Reed said, they can pick up a rock, but they can't pick up a horn. Once that horn falls off, it is no more than a mineral deposit, just like a rock. At the most, I could see having a season, but not making people get a hunting license. There's people out there that do this, not intentionally, but go out there just to enjoy the wilderness and pick up these horns. No intention of hunting, never hunted. And I don't think that's right to saddle them with a hunting license. Thank you.
Mitch?
Mitch Pizzetti for the Elko County Wildlife Advisory Board. We had some great debate on this issue at our county level. Obviously, we decided to support the department's recommendation. We had a few changes that we would like to see. We kind of didn't think it was fair that the residents had to have a license, but we most definitely thought maybe that non-residents that were out there shed hunting should be required to get a license. Some of the comment that was made by the people at our meeting, if you go to another state to hunt anything, the coyote, you have to buy a license. You know, and in Elko County, we see a lot of non-residents coming into the county to collect sheds. It's more of a commercial deal than it is just the average person out there. And it is these people that are coming in and they sit, sometimes they work Elko County and then they move on down to White Pine County and then they move on down to Lincoln County because we don't have a season. So it's easiest to come to Nevada first and then go back. So that's kind of where we came up, you know, we endorsed the season, but we really questioned if we should require a license or not. And we just kind of compromised at the point where, you know, maybe the non-residents should have to have a license. You know, and there's always loopholes that can be found. Well, somebody said, well, their kids will pick up the sheds, you know. Well, yeah, kids will be out there, but they're still, kids are going to be in school. These guys spend months in Nevada picking up sheds commercially for money, you know. And there was examples at our board of residents living in Elko County that had seen the abuse put on by these shed collectors that are doing it commercially, you know, and it's not a good thing for wildlife. And even in instances where people don't intend to harass the wildlife, it happens, especially for like mule deer that migrate into Harrison Pass and Ruby Mountains. They come there, they might see them lose the shed, but intentionally they go after the shed, and the deer has no choice but to move into the 3 to 4 feet deep snow, you know, because that's just their only escape route. So if we have a season that limits that ability, January 1 to April 1st, those deer are more dispersed before people get so strongly into the field to start trying to pick up those sheds. So that's why we supported it. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey?
For the record, Corey Levin, I apologize if my voice cuts out. Lincoln County, we voted to support this regulation. We think it's a good start. We appreciate the change from take to collect. That's a good point. We also had questions on the 12-year-old, you know, significance of the hunt license. It's very clean, simple. The other thing we want to suggest is we do a pretty good comprehensive review of this in 2 years. Then maybe by the 3rd year, we'd have some nuts and bolts to work with. Let's see what we got. It's a good start. I want to take a minute and kind of point out some things. Times have changed. It's not 1975. We need to adapt a little bit to some of this change. Some people in some parts of the state have not seen this yet. Whether they ever will or not, I don't know. But in eastern Nevada, it is crazy. What was once a random act and a random recreational, you know, happening where somebody was out on a picnic or a hike or whatever and they happened to find a shed antler has turned into a complete dominating recreational activity. It's oftentimes competitive for not only the trophy side of it, but the marketability and the value side. Horns are valuable. They are a marketable item, okay? And they are a direct product of our wildlife resource. That's something, even though they're removed and they're on the ground, they are a product of our resource, and we need to address that. It can be argued there are more field days spent in eastern Nevada hunting shed horns now, shed antlers, than there are during a regular hunting season. It's not on the weekends, it's not on a Monday, it's not on a Tuesday. Every day there are hundreds of people out there hunting. It's not anecdotal. I'd invite anybody to come down any day of the week during this time of year, and we'll go for a ride. The increase in activity with this type of sport or this type of recreational activity, it's going to increase the other factors, the stressors on these animals are going to increase. The increase in other multiple use activities is going to show itself. It's going to show itself sometime down the road. We talk about sage grouse all the time. We talk about all these other things all the time. And some of these other multiple use activities that are ongoing and regulated also are going to be affected on this. I think we need to check ourselves up on those types of things. As far as the hunt license requirement, I think it's a great idea. I think it's the first step we have to harnessing the non-resident factor that we have. We're outnumbered at least 5 to 1, maybe 10 to 1 by non-residents down in that area. We just happen to logistically sit from St. George, Cedar City, Utah area, which is, you know, a couple hours drive, and we are inundated by these non-residents, okay? Their impacts are numerous. They're there every day, and I think that the hunt license side of it is a good harness on that. A good majority of the people, or a good percentage of the people that are going to be shed hunting, they've already applied for their big game tags anyway. They're going to have their hunting license. Folks that are out there hunting sheds or something, or picnicking, or there's a good possibility somebody with that party is going to have a hunting license. And so the hunting license aspect for the residents, to me, seems like a no-brainer. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal. You know, the idea that these types of things are coming at us, and the idea that this is a new policy or a new regulation, that we've been discussing this for a couple of years. We've been hashing it over. We've had multiple discussions at our own CAB meeting on it. We've been trying to think outside of the box and think of ways to get after this scenario, and this is a good start. We got to start somewhere. We got to keep pushing for it. We got to keep looking at it, ways to improve it if it doesn't work, and you know, it's just a good start. I just want to go back and say the wildlife resource is definitely being affected. The sheds are a product of that, and we need to take a serious look at it.
Mr. Dixon? Paul, and then that's it.
For the record, Paul Dixon, Clark Cab. Probably like every other cab, we had a sizable discussion in Clark on this topic, and I had actually asked one of Rob's officers, game wardens, to come down. Lieutenant Maynard came and spoke to us, and I think it was very helpful to have law enforcement there, because a lot of the questions and concerns that people had, like, well, what if I'm walking with my child or my family member, my wife, and she picks up a shed, she doesn't have a hunting license, or we have one, or she's there with her sister and they go for a walk and they come back with a shed. Are they going to get a ticket or something else? And I think, well, Lieutenant Maynard, policy or procedure like this, there's going to be a leniency period where you look at things. I mean, if you come out of the field and they see your car, you have a shed, the likelihood they'll give you a warning that you're not supposed to do that and make you drop it, probably not, is probably real. But if they come out and you got a truckload full of sheds and you don't have something, that's a different story. And I think it comes down to officer discretion. While you try to write a very general new regulation out there that people are going to follow, you try to write it very general, and then over time you hone that in based on where you have real issues, not perceived issues. And so for a while you have officer discretion of whether they're going to write a ticket or not, and you find out we have a lot of people collecting onesies, twosies, it's not a problem. Or we have 99% collect that, and we have 1% collecting a ton. And that's getting caught. And so you understand where it is, but you use that officer discretion. And I think from a Clark perspective, we felt that annually the department with the game warden should come back and present to the cabs and the commission, this is what we've learned. And so that in a couple of years you can look at statistics and say, how do you change that regulation that we're putting in place? But I think we need to keep the regulation, as we talked about, as simple as possible. So as simple as possible is set a season and require a hunting license. If it turns out that having a hunting license, it becomes a burden for residents, or it isn't working with non-residents, you're gonna learn that through the fact-based data collection that'll come in from the game boards. You're also gonna learn whether or not you even have game boards, as pointed out by Bill Miller, to actually go out and cause there to be somebody to be caught for doing things. I mean, you have to have an officer there. I mean, if you're harassing wildlife, we have harassment laws, as Rob presented earlier, for chasing wildlife and dogs and harassing them on the books now. We're not writing things. It comes down to make it simple as you can when you start this regulation, and then track it with time and space. Thanks.
Hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Would you tell us what the Clark Cabinet recommended?
Oh, I guess I could say we unanimously recommended that we follow basically having a season and having a hunting license as a minimum starting point that can be monitored for things. Sorry. Thanks.
Burnside.
Craig Burnside, Douglas Cap. We also had a healthy discussion on this, where I tell you what our recommendation was. I'll tell you a little bit about the discussion. The question first arose if really the goal of the regulation is to protect the wildlife during that critical time of year. We understood a season, but questioned the need for a license. And further discussion is like, okay, well, how does someone get a hunting license? Well, they have to take a hunter safety course, which also includes a section on hunter ethics. And so with that in mind, we said, you know what, maybe that is a good thing that people have hunting licenses. And so they have gone through some indoctrination on hunter ethics, and at least have been informed that the practices that are causing the problem now shouldn't be done. And one question did come up, and I don't know if Rob could answer it, but the question came up if people can, or seizure rules are in effect for people that are hunting without a hunting license. So if someone is caught with sheds, I mean, can their vehicle be seized like they do if they're hunting without a license? That question came up. But even with that, we unanimously voted to recommend approval of this regulation.
Mr. Johnson and then Kathy Smith.
Brad Johnson, Lyon County. We had a much similar discussion at our CAB board. Quite a bit of public comments were that they had seen a lot of activity out there, wildlife harassment. We just thought that the regulation could be simplified a bit by making a prohibition from collecting the shed antlers from January 1st to April 14th. We thought that was just a cleaner way to just set forth a prohibition rather than the reverse. We didn't think the hunting license should necessarily be required. We got a lot of public comment though about off-road vehicles being used off of roads to collect shed antlers, and thought that needs to be examined in the context of this. If the goal here is to prevent the harassment with animals, and we saw the harassment laws yesterday, but a lot of the one of the individuals who attended our meeting who is involved in this sees it a lot out there where people are going off the roads on the quads, and that needs to be examined. We ultimately approved and said that the concept of setting a season would be fine, limit the harassment of the animals, and supported that type of regulation. One concern that we have though is, what does from the field mean? Does this apply to private property as well? I mean, if I'm down on my ranch property in Mason Valley along the Walker River and there's a deer antler there, and it's February and I'm cleaning up the ranch area, I can't pick up that antler until April 15th. It seems to me, and I understand officer discretion, and I trust that the current game wardens and this commission would show that type of discretion. But I don't know who is going to be in place 15 years from now. And so I am concerned about activities that could become criminal on private property where you're not engaged in commercial collecting sheds, you're just cleaning up your property. You might be burning ditch in January or February and there happens to be an antler down in there. Now, all of a sudden now I'm violating the law. That doesn't seem to make sense. So we support this concept of a season and some regulations, but I think some further work needs to be done to try to figure out how encompassing you're going to be with such a blanket prohibitions. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
Smith of Reno, Nevada. I'm happy to see if you're interested in the harassment of the wildlife, and hopefully that will extend to carnivores at some point. But I did want to point out that on eBay, as far as these shed antlers go, here's an elk antler shed for $600 or $1,000 buy it now option. There's some small elk sheds for $450. This is a big business. People use it decoratively in their home. I think the people that collect these should have to give something back for the wildlife.
Okay, Mr.
That's right.
Miller and then Castanella. Bill.
I was waiting for the cabs to go first.
Okay.
Tom Castanelli representing Humboldt County. We also had a lot of discussion on this. We had a split vote on our motion. We'll get to that in a minute, but some of the reasons the way we went is the majority of our board members and the audience, the whole audience, realizes there's a problem with the shed hunting, and half of us felt we could do it with the current laws, and it was, we discussed this a lot, harassment charges, how hard are they to, what we went through yesterday as an example, how hard are they to enforce? I mean, it's totally on the department to prove a harassment charge of these animals, and I just don't think it's gonna work under the current laws. We need more teeth in the current system for our department to handle this problem. And our law enforcement, we got one warden for every county. I mean, how are we gonna get them out there? And whereas if we have a season, our motion that we supported was to support the department's recommendation we did not support the season dates. There was a lot of controversy about that. We have chucker hunters out in the field, and we would like to see the season go from April 15th to February 1st. We feel that month of January, there's not going to be a lot of shed hunters in the field naturally. You'll get older horns, but we have chucker hunters out there, and that's who chimed in on this. They go, we're out in the field all of January, and we pick up horns, mainly deer horns, and they're 2-year-old deer horns or a year-old deer horns. They're not fresh deer horns at that time. And we would like to see that date extended to February 1st. And our motion passed 3-2. But we do feel there is a major problem with the harassment of our wildlife at a critical time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grimm.
I'll be super quick. We didn't have any public at our meeting, just our cab. We had voted to go with the department recommendations on the season, but we didn't want people to have a hunting license per se to go and do it. So seasons, yes, hunting license, no.
Any other cabs? Okay, Bill, you want to come up?
Today I wish I was still a cab, so I got more than 3 minutes to talk about something that I'm passionate about, and I've been working on it since around 2007. And one of the reasons that I came before the commission years ago was that during a CRM, a Coordinated Resource Management Steering Committee meeting, the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service saw that this was an issue, and the only way that they could handle it at the time was to keep the public completely off, which meant trappers, everybody. Nobody's going to be on these winter ranges where these animals were. That wasn't the right thing to do. And I told them as a sportsman, give us a shot, give us a chance, and let's see what we can come up with. And I'm grateful to listen to a lot of the comments in here today. There's a lot of comments. I do want to tell you that I did attend the Wildlife Advisory Board meeting the other day, like I stated last night. There was close to 50 people in that room. And the consensus of that room was to allow us to continue to do what we're doing, but in a way to fund it. A hunting license has come up, has been mentioned several times in here about being important. A lot of the people within the state that hunt sheds, the majority do have hunting licenses. We did have people within that audience that don't hunt. They haven't taken hunter safety, like hiking early in the spring looking for sheds. Great, hikers aren't really the issue. Game Warden Scott Giles stated that evening that of all the non-resident people, 85% of those shed hunters this year already had a non-resident hunting license. So they are all aware. There is no money to be generated to support education and additional law enforcement, which is required to see this thing through. If you vote to push this thing through today, it's not going to work. It's a great concept, but it's not going to work. We need something to, you can't have a stamp because the stamp has to be attached to a license. Some type of a permit to support this program is what we need to take a look at. You know, 2014 shed season right now is in the rearview mirror. It's pretty close. There's a few small little bulls still packing, all the deers have shed. This gives us time to put a workshop together. There's a lot of input that I heard today that we can sit down and put something together that'll work for the state of Nevada. I've heard a lot of programs that the state of Nevada is first on, and we've taken the lead and others have followed us. And I think this is another thing that we can do besides closing units down and closing areas down. The Bureau of Land Management and the BLM are limited on their law enforcement. The Bureau of Land Management has no law enforcement. So I think we really need to take a look at what's going on out there. There was a talk about chasing the animals. Well, there has been some reports of that, but if you sit back and you start watching the mountainside and you see the elk or the deer moving, and you look a mile or two away from them, those animals are moving because of this guy unintentionally in his four-wheeler, off-road, no law enforcement. He's out looking for sheds on his four-wheeler because he's too lazy to get out there and walk.
Could you wrap it up, Bill? We're getting up.
Wrap it up. Yes, so my suggestion is, I'm willing to help, sit down and help with staff. I don't think today's the day we make a decision, but I'd like to see the direction move forward in establishing something that answers all the concerns that we've listened to in here today and listened from all these other advisory boards. Okay. Thank you.
Any more public comment? Okay, seeing none. Any further public comment in Clark County? No?
No
Okay.
comment, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, any further public comment in Elko?
No comment.
Okay, thank you. We'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. Commissioner McBath.
Can we have Rob come up and bring your NRS?
Bring your
I want to concentrate on the hunting license issue. First of all, I want to just ask you a general question. I believe last meeting, we indicated that we couldn't have a fee we didn't have the authority to do any kind of a fee for shed antler, collecting shed antler. Is that right? Is that my recollection?
For the record, Rob Bonamici, we would have to look at if we could require a permit. I think it would be difficult without legislative change because of the issue that even though the legislature did provide this commission the authority to regulate shed antlers, because of the fact that we have to get that authority because it wasn't considered wildlife, I'm a little hesitant to say we can go ahead and develop a permit type fee. We'd have to get legislative authority for that.
Okay, that was my recollection. So now, in lieu of that, we said, well, we could do a hunting license. And I'll tell you that at the time that we talked about that, I was under the assumption that shed antlers were wildlife. So now in my mind, I'm concerned, does the Department of Wildlife, or do we have the authority to require a hunting license in a situation that is not the hunting of wildlife? And I guess I need to, the reason I wanted to bring NRS is to hopefully read us the statute that requires a hunting license and And is this an activity that is associated closely enough with what is defined as hunting under NRS that it allows us to actually require a hunting license to do something that I guess there's sort of disconnect there.
Okay, NRS 502.010 reads, section 1, a person who hunts or fishes any wildlife without having first procured a license or permit to do so, as provided in this title, is guilty of a misdemeanor, except that A, license to hunt or fish is not required of a resident of this state who is under 12 years of age, unless required for the issuance of tags as prescribed in this title or by regulation of the commission. So that covers the hunting license requirement. The nexus would be, and LCB would have to look at it, would be is now that shed antlers fall under the jurisdiction of the Department of Wildlife, Board of Wildlife Commissioners, then can a hunting license be required for that?
Then do you think that the definition of wildlife needs to be changed in NRS? In other words, I perceive a conflict here. And does the definition of wildlife need to be changed to pull shed antlers into the definition, so therefore it all syncs up?
That would be by far the cleanest way. There is a nexus an argument that could be made, whether it would prevail or not, I don't know. But under NRS also, it's unlawful to possess any wildlife or part thereof. So part thereof could make the argument that an antler is a part thereof, but then there's case law in, I believe it's Wyoming, I might be wrong, I think it is Wyoming, that says shed antlers are not a part of wildlife. So it's one of those things that I'm honestly couldn't advise how it would turn out one way or the other. I can see where arguments could be made either way, but the strongest, safest route is to change the NRS to include shed antlers as part of wildlife.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, when I was on the commission prior, this was an issue that had been brought up, and I don't know why I was selected, but my voice was actually on the radio over in Eastern Nevada, representing the Department of Wildlife or the Wildlife Commission, asking people to do things responsibly in the field. And I think that was about 2007 timeframe. Bill was right in there. Yeah, so it's been a recognized problem. We've talked about different regulations for shed hunting, and at that point, we didn't go that far because it was a legitimate family activity, and it was something that the residents of the community enjoyed with their families. Fast forward to 2010, 2011 timeframe, I had an opportunity to spend from January through June in Eastern Nevada doing a job for Mountain Weather Power. And things had evolved over just that short time frame. And it was becoming decreasing family activity and increasing commercial activity. And the number of license plates that you saw that had Utah on them, and it was easy to pick out the shed hunter, not buy their camper and the number of sheds in the back of their truck, but they had evolved past using quads to look for their sheds. Quads are too cumbersome, can't get up to washes nearly well. So they were going to fat tracks and motorcycles. So you could pick out a shed hunter real easy by the number of fat tracks, the fat tire motorcycles in town. It's not one pickup truck, it's not two. You can't drive through either this time of year without seeing half the trucks, the fat tracks in the back. It's moving away from a family activity. I really want it to be a family activity. I believe in getting your family out into the woods and enjoying an afternoon with your family. I believe because of the commercialization of the shed hunting, it has driven families away from this activity because it's competition. The sheds aren't there because the commercial pickers are getting them before the family activity can get there. I want to get back to that family activity, and I've heard anecdotally, and I think Commissioner Bliss will back this up, that there will be increased participation in family activity if this regulation goes into place, because it will put people back onto an even playing field. You won't have guys out there with spot and scopes waiting for that bull to drop. Maybe they'll still be out there with spot and scopes waiting for the bull to drop, but they can't go collect that field that horn from the field at that point. So I believe there will be a benefit to the general sportsmen of the state of Nevada, and there will be an increased family activity come back. That's my honest opinion. I'm not going off anecdotal of what I've seen. I worked from the Go Shoot Indian Reservation. I don't know if anybody knows where Mount Wither Power lines go, but we were at the end of every one of them. And we saw it a lot. And it was more so than I would have ever believed. Even doing the commercial and doing the things, it's out of control. And I don't want to take away from anybody's legitimate activity. I just think the commercialization is really running hard here, and with every state around us having seasons and we don't, we're a magnet for everybody else. And as soon as we catch up with seasons, I think we'll turn into a family activity here, because those people will be doing that activity in their own home state during that time that our families will be out there legitimately. So I'm going to support this regulation wholeheartedly and believe in it. Commissioner Drew.
Rob, just a couple of questions. One idea that was brought up by Humboldt is to move the December 31st date back to February 1st. The way this is written, does that create an issue? Because I believe it says the calendar year in which the department issued the hunting license. So can we make that change, the way this is written?
Yes, I believe we can, and the calendar year in which the department issues the hunting license, I believe, is OCB language.
And that would be February 28th, March 1st to February 28th.
Right.
Would be the license calendar or the license year.
Right, and from my perspective, I'm not an attorney, but I really don't see why we need that statement in there.
And then I guess the next question I would have is, I am a little bit uncomfortable, I think as Commissioner Macbeth is, with the hunting license part of this. I understand the need for the season. I'm relatively comfortable with that. I'm really uneasy about the requirement for a hunting license. And I don't think it's gonna give us a bunch of revenue if we have it in there, and I think it's gonna cause some potential heartburn and precedent that we aren't real clear on if we do. So if we were to take that out, and number 2 just read, a person may take or may collect, is that gonna cause us any problem with that change?
No, not at all.
And then my last question, Rob, for you would be, obviously anytime something like this changes, education is a huge part of it. I think there's gonna be a huge need to get the word out to people. So have you guys anticipated from your end, if this were to be put into effect, what kind of plans you have for getting the word out on that?
If we follow something similar like we did in 2008, where we did a pretty comprehensive educational type awareness and enforcement, and by enforcement, the first year I mean just having officers out there to advise people and let them know of the new regulation and so forth. That project alone cost $28,000. I just looked it up yesterday when it came up, what we had spent on that. So we do not have the money for that.
Commissioner Bliss.
Yeah, I'd just like to maybe make something clear too. Mr. Miller stated that, the consensus in White Pine County was, not to have the license or whatever, but in all actuality, that the White Pine County Board did support this document as written. I just want to make that clear that, the advisory board did support it. With that being said, the reason I would support this document, for several reasons actually, but the wildlife, whether it's deer, or elk, or antelope, it don't matter, wildlife in general. This time of year, they're in that place for a particular reason. That's where the best feed is at that time. And when an animal sheds an antler and someone goes to collect that particular antler, say it's a bull elk, there's 14 other bulls there, they go up, collect that horn, they run them animals out of that particular spot. Now they've created two different things. They've run them into some country that may not have as good a feed, and then they've also introduced stress onto that animal, and once something's stressed, they don't eat. These animals are coming off, they went through the rut, they are surviving a winter, and then they're trying to replenish and get their body condition up then. And I think that for them to be left alone for a certain time of the year like that, it is crucial. As far as the hunting license portion of it goes, I believe that it would be part of the part that is, we'll go back to education, the hunter safety class and all that stuff. I think that's where we could touch on getting the word out to folks, and why we have to do this is through a hunter safety course. But I also understand Commissioner Drew and Macbeth's concerns as well. I'd like to see it clean and make sure that there isn't any issues down the road. But I believe this is needed. I see it, and I think it's a good starting point as well.
Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too share Commissioner Drew and Macbeth's thought on the hunting license part of it. It's just another way that I see for people to get sideways with the law on that. The season, I think, is definitely prudent and needed, but the hunting license part, I have a little bit of an issue with that, with people that just don't have any idea that are here and pick it up. I mean, they're still going to probably have an issue with the season part of it, but the hunting license part, I question a little bit.
Commissioner Young, and then Commissioner Moran.
My position, I'm a little torn here on this one. Philosophically, I agree with Mr. Reed 100%. Bureaucratic situation that is somewhat creates, it's a little bothersome to me growing up with Native Nevada. Always gone out. It's our tradition in our state, our families, to go out into the hills and look around and pick up an arrowhead here and there. I know they'll put you in federal prison now for that. And my kid, I've told him, I says, don't ever let him do a search warrant in your house, because you've got hundreds of arrowheads. And but then Corey Lytle's a very credible individual, and he's a credible cab member, and he tells me this, and I'm just not sure I'm ready to make the decision factually. I think the season, no problem with the season, because the stress thing is 100%, as Chad said. I just a little hung up on the licensing. I 100% do not want Utah people coming over to our state to take one thing out of here. Is in a commercial sense. They've taken enough out of our state commercially. That's just my own philosophical thought. But by the same token, I certainly don't want to saddle our citizens in our state with some unnecessary law. I think Bill hit on the head, nail on the head of maybe working on this maybe a little bit more is where I'm at. Just a little bit more information. I don't doubt what Jack said, though. He says he saw this, it's going on. I was unaware it was that bad until Corey and Jack brought it up. It's just the thought of that, people just by the hundreds coming over here in that one particular area. I'd like to talk to Rob about it a little bit more from a law enforcement perspective of how we could actually actually attack that specific problem with that, creating that undue hardship for our citizens. So I'm a little torn.
Commissioner Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm kind of in the same boat with Bill on this one. I have a question for Rob. Would it create a problem in enforcement to insert the word hunt in there anywhere?
To hunt for sheds.
Hunt/collect?
It may present a legal issue from the standpoint of hunting is defined as, where you do the definition here. The words to hunt and their derivatives, hunting and hunted, mean to search for, pursue, or attract any wildlife for the purposes and with the means of capturing, injuring, or killing that wildlife. Every attempt to capture, injure, kill, and every act of assistance to any other person in capturing, injuring, or killing that wildlife. So I don't think we're capturing the shed antlers, we're not killing them, we're not attempting to kill the shed antlers. So I think from a legal perspective, we would win that before by saying they were hunting shed antlers. And then another comment with regards to the hunting license, not that I'm pushing for it at all or anything like that, is the version you have in front of you of the regulation, LCB has approved it. So they've made the connection that yes, indeed, a hunting license can be required. Like I said earlier, I'm not sure I'm totally on board with that, but.
Well, the reason I asked that question is it seems to me kind of ironic that the people that we're trying to target with this regulation are the ones that are out hunting the sheds, not the casual people that may pick one up in the process of any other activity. And Mr. Johnston made a good point that made me start thinking that we have members of our family on the ranch that do not hunt. They don't have hunting licenses. Many instances, if you go to a hay corral that you're feeding out of, when these animals are shedding their horns, if you drive a piece of equipment, put a horn through a tire, you probably won't want to do that again. And so the horns, generally there's a search. You go around, check for the horns, pick them up, antlers, pick them up, stash them in a corner of the hay corral. Eventually haul them off. That could be viewed by you as collecting these antlers. And when we'd be picking them up, it is during the prohibited period. And so I get doubts on that, and I'm not saying that you guys in enforcement would do that, because you probably would not.
Yeah, understand.
But those are the things that make me kind of put doubts in my mind as far as what we're doing here. If we're going to actually pursue people that are commercially collecting these antlers, that's fine. I don't have a problem with it, but it may create problems for the unintended consequences for some people.
Yes, with regards to that, there's a couple issues. I've talked to a lot of the other chiefs in other states, and I can tell you right now, there's no perfect solution out there. None of them are happy with what they have. Some of them just have a season, that's all. Some of them require a license, some of them require an education course, and it boils down to having adequate law enforcement coverage. That's the bottom line. We saw that when we I did the work program and got an additional $28,000 for our division that year to put on these special projects and saturate the area. And I think Bill Miller can attest to it. The first year after we did that, the problems went away. The second year, the problems weren't really there. But then people started going, when are the game wardens coming out with the airplane and all that? And then once they figured out we weren't coming back, the problems came back. So that's, and Wyoming told me the other day, Rob, you don't have enough game wardens to enforce this.
Commissioner McBeth.
I actually had one other thing in my notes that I wanted to ask. When at the last meeting, we had a requirement for a permit for commercial collection, I believe. And I see that it's not here anymore. And I'm just wondering what the, I don't know if this was recall that we were going to do away with that. And just wanted to know what the thoughts were with respect to why we couldn't have permit requirement for commercial collection, and maybe discuss what is commercial collection. What could we? I don't have that prior version in front of me, so I don't know what we have.
Yeah, just in a nutshell, commercial collection of wildlife. So again, we're back in the dilemma: is it wildlife? Isn't it arena? Which I think, with LCBs throwing the word hunting in there and saying that's acceptable, the argument is yes, it's wildlife, so we could have a commercial collection permit. And then you have the issue of what is commercial collection, and one of the key factors there is, I'm not an expert on the Interstate Commerce Act, but we got to be very careful that we apply it equally to residents and non-residents. So we're going to have to do that, because we will end up in litigation over a violation of the Commercial Commerce Act. But that is an avenue to look at this from the perspective of commercial collection versus season dates. But I'm not sure that's going to address, from the biologist perspective, the impact on the wildlife itself. We have a lot of people out there, families out there, good people out there collecting, they aren't intending to harm anything. But due to the numbers of them out there, it is pushing wildlife into less than optimal areas.
Yeah, and I wasn't suggesting that commercial collectors have not be subject to a season, but that if their activity doesn't rise to, sufficient level, maybe we should require a permit. But if it's tied to collection of wildlife, and we're back to that issue again, I'll be honest, I'm really worried of the enforceability of this from the legal standpoint. And with all due respect to LCD, I would want us to go back and specifically ask them to look at it again, and specifically address the provisions that we've gone over today, because I think they're problematic.
The cleanest way probably just be if the commission's desire was to take some kind of action now or in the future, would be just a open and close season, and then assess the impacts from there. Because that might in itself address a lot of the commercial collection, because the commercial collectors, when we did the project, they're coming from Montana, Colorado, all over the West, because their seasons are closed. So if their seasons are closed and our seasons are closed, then they got to make some choices as to where they're going to collect when all the western states open approximately at the same time. So that in itself may diminish the problem.
Commissioner Lane.
Well,
to go to that, then it doesn't seem to me to make sense to make the season from April 15th to February 1st, because what you've done is shorten the time frame when you can't collect. Wouldn't you want to keep it where it is right now? I mean, it doesn't, I don't understand why you would, if this is all we're going to have is a season, you know, it sounds to me like we really can't talk about the hunting license at this time. So if all of you've got is a season, I would assume that you'd want to keep it from April 15th to December 31st. Yeah.
I guess my point on this, and maybe the chief can correct me based on what you guys see in the field, or maybe the director could correct me based on what we see biologically, but I think most of your commercial guys are going to be after the fresh brown horns. They hit the ground, and in most instances, I don't think you have a lot of that going on in January. I think most of the take that occurs in January is incidental to people being out chukar hunting or doing some other activity. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've walked a lot of miles in January, and I think I've come across one brown horn in my life doing that. So I think from February on is really that critical time when the commercial collectors would be out there, and when you got people specifically being in the field for shed collecting and not, you know, picking them up as kind of a secondary means to something else they're doing.
I'd say that's a fairly accurate statement.
And I'm gonna have a follow-up question for that now. Your elk are intact through January, but a lot of times your deer aren't. And Kevin, I don't know if you've seen them, but there's some benches in Area 17 that are heavy deer wintering areas that have quad tracks from one end to the other graded out early. Tony, you're more than the mule deer expert. They drop a lot sooner, and I like the December or the January date. Yeah, if you want to, Kevin, because I've seen impacts in Area 17 in January with quads going cross country in the heavy deer areas.
Kevin Strozzi, Nye County Advisory Board. Just speaking for myself, I agree with you, Chairman Rob. If we let that go till January, you're gonna get in those exact spots you're talking about in Nye County, and I'm sure in a lot of other places. Those guys are gonna go hammer those brown deer horns as soon as they, you know, they're gonna go run those deer around as soon as they can. I'd like to see that, that date, you know, that December 31st date. That'll keep those guys, let those bucks do their thing until that April 15th.
And Director Walsey, when do you think the majority of the big bucks shed their horns?
I guess there's a lot of variability from year to year. That's a artifact of body condition, nutritional condition. The literature says that in years where they're in good body condition, they'll lose their antlers sooner because they're starting the process of antlerigenesis sooner. Idaho has always imposed a restriction of January 15th for any postseason surveys because they figure after January 15th there's significant antler drop and they can't accurately classify bucks from the air. We try to do all of our surveys even before mid-December. Anything after mid-December is suspect. So I'd have the same concern that's been expressed here, that you'd be actually encouraging people to have more of a disturbance in a shorter time frame where people in certain areas may be trying to get out ahead of the game in late January or mid-January to capitalize on what they can. And then the elk, can be well into April. Really isn't a consideration in January for brown elk.
It's not really public comment, but I want to know what Tom has to say. I asked Mr. Strozzi, so I'm.
Yes, no, it's Humboldt County. The other discussion we had was maybe make these season regional too, or by unit, because most of your chukar hunters, the thing that's going to happen, you're going to have chukar hunters that are going to pick up horns in that off time. I know it's going to be a problem. Most of your chukar hunters are in areas where we don't have these massive shed horns out there. You know, you're walking all day long and you're lucky to find one. And it's just, would be nice to be able to pick it up. That was,
Commissioner Lewis.
I just like to make a comment on what Mr. Castanelli said, though. If you make it different, you may focus, you might not be getting a bunch of shed antler hunters there now, but if they can't go somewhere else in the state, then you may have them there.
but you could regulate that as you go along. I mean, as that come up, you can change your seasons, just like we do seasons now. It's gonna be a season, so make it flexible so the counties and everybody could give you input on it. That's your season setting dates.
Okay.
One follow-up comment I want to make, Bill brought up the law enforcement issue and Rob brought it up, and I think Rob sells his game orange short sometimes because I don't think I can go into northern Washoe without Randy finding me. Chad's been with me, come back, his business card's on my truck. Just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there. Joe Mass, such a good friend of mine, I never saw him in the field, but he saw me plenty of times, so.
Yeah, the tracker on your truck's still working.
What's that?
The tracker on your truck's still working.
Sometimes I honestly think, not honestly, but it seems like it because he can find me. Commissioner McBeth.
Yeah, I'd like to address this law enforcement issue. I guess I'm struggling buying that as being something we should be concerned about. We have a law enforcement issue on every single game animal that we have. We know that. And I'm struggling to see the difference between law enforcement issues with shed antlers and law enforcement issues with any other game animal that we have. And so I'm just thinking that that's a non-issue. Second is I think everybody in this room, any sportsman in this room is part of law enforcement. And so there's an army of us out there and, we have, a lot of eyes out there, a lot of people that care. And so I think that I'm less apt to buy that law enforcement argument.
Any other comments? Seeing none, anybody want to take a stab in the motion?
Dr. Jeremy, I'll try.
Okay.
I make a motion that we accept the revised proposed regulation, LCB file number R155-12, to read as the following. Section 1 stays the same, there will be no changes. Section 2 would read, a person may take shed antlers from the field from April 15th to December 31st, inclusive of the calendar year in which the department issues the hunting license.
We have a motion.
Can I ask a question?
What's that?
Can I ask a question?
We need a second to ask the question. If we get a second.
I'll make a second for discussion purposes.
Okay.
And then I guess the only question I would have to Commissioner Lane, or one of the questions I would have to Commissioner Lane is, I think yesterday we had talked about changing the word take to collect in both number 1 and number 2. I don't know that that was.
I'll accept that.
Do you have something to add, Commissioner Bliss?
No, that was my question.
Okay. Commissioner McBeth.
I guess, first of all, I support the season, and I do feel that the license issue is problematic. But I've heard a lot of really good comments today, and one of the suggestions that's been made is should we move this down? And so I guess one question I have is, are we going to be passing a regulation today, potentially? And should we be considering maybe pushing this to one more meeting, or maybe June? Is it going to cause any problems, for getting it in place for next year? Because I do believe that there's been a lot of really good comments that are made, and I'd like to explore maybe a little bit more commercial commercial aspects of this, and so I guess that's where I'm at. I'm kind of, you know, definitely in support of it. I think we got a resource issue that we need to deal with, and so I'm definitely supporting it, minus the license issue. But by pushing it down the road, we can even have that explored with LCB to see if that is what their mind, you know, how they're analyzing that, because I'm not seeing it. So.
Commissioner Drew?
I believe that we had the commercial aspect in there, and I think this body actually motioned to take that out because it was kind of confusing the issue. And so I mean, I would view this as an initial step. I'm not completely comfortable with it. I'm more comfortable with it in regards to taking out the hunting license aspect. But I think it's something that we need to take a small step on, and I know to some it's going to be a really big step. See how it works, and then if we have issues with the commercial side of things, we can always come back and look at that at a later date. But I believe the motion that's on the table at this point would finalize this, or at least start the wheels in motion to getting this finalized.
Yes, it would. If passed, it would finalize it. One suggestion, though, with regards to collect, we may want to consider removing the words "from the field," because we're putting ourselves back in the same dilemma. They can be out there collecting and stockpiling them in the field. So an element of the crime has to be they removed it from the field. So if they never remove it, there wouldn't be a crime.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We've had discussion. We've had enough discussion on the motion. I don't know if the motion taker would want to remove that motion so we can restate a clearer motion. Would that be?
So you want me to, okay, I'll remove my motion.
Is the second good with removing it so we can get it?
Yeah, I would retract the second.
Okay, so now we don't have a motion on the table. So now if we have a clean motion reflecting the changes that we discussed, I think that'd be the cleanest way for the record then. So do you want to try again?
Yes, I'll try again. I make a motion that we accept revised proposed regulation LCB file number R155-12 to read section 1 to read as, except as otherwise provided in this section, a person shall not collect shed antlers, period. Number 2, a person may collect shed antlers from the field from April 15th to December 31st, inclusive of the calendar year in which the department, period, after calendar year.
Do we have a motion? We can't have discussion without a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Lane, second by Commissioner Morey. Commissioner McBeth?
Is this a substantial enough change that's going to have to go back to LCB?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Okay, motion second. Any further discussion? Commissioner Morey?
I just have one quick question of Rob. From the enforcement standpoint, what is the definition of collect? If I have a bunch of antlers stored in my shed, is that collecting them?
No.
Okay.
I don't have Black's Law Dictionary in front of me, but I'd have to look up the definition of collect.
Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?